One. This is Dr. Jack Nordhaus of Insurance Marketing and Management Services, and today it's my pleasure to speak with Al Diamond, consultant par excellence of the Agency Consulting Group, and we're going to be talking about how you go about creating super producers. And Al, thanks again for helping us. We love you, man.
My pleasure, Jack.
Well, this is a bit about me, and I've been around for a while, and I enjoy doing these things. I always learn from them, and of course there's nobody better than Al. As you talk about an impressive resume. You've been doing it, wow, many years.
I've been around for a while too.
Yeah.
My first client was Moses and his agency.
Amen. Yes, should have hung a right at the Red Sea. But anyway, today we're going to be talking about super producers, and just, what is a super producer?
Well, Jack, a super producer is the term for a producer who is generally client-driven and whose job it is to bring new clients to an insurance agency. We have many agents from many years ago who claim to be great servicers, who have long lists of acronyms behind their name that show them to be experts and specialists in insurance, and that's great. We need people who know insurance, but the real producers in our industry, the youngsters who are coming up now as well as seasoned veterans, their main interest is bringing clients to an insurance agency and maintaining client relationships to assure that the clients virtually stay forever. Where we have super producers in insurance agencies, when clients leave, it is a terrible surprise. Mostly they retire, they sell their businesses, and that's the reason for losing business. But as long as they're in business, they stay. The reason for that is that it's not just a sales job. You've got to be as technically competent as the traditional independent agency system has proven itself. But their greatest strength lies in generating and earning the confidence of clients. In our realm, the things that keeps our normal producers from becoming super producers are performing functions in the agency that's outside of the core of their business, establishing and maintaining client relationships.
Like servicing.
Servicing, depending on how you define the term.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that keeps producers from becoming super producers are when they handle so many clients that they can't manage the relationships themselves. We've seen that a lot. It's a trap that many producers fall into. So we have a motivation issue with super producers. How do we get them motivated? How do we keep them motivated? If you have producers in your agency who you think could be super producers, what's the best motivation for them? Well, the primary function, the primary motivator of most producers is money. We need to financially incentivize a producer to do what's important for the agency. And what's important for the agency is for producers to grow their books of business. So what do? First of all, we reward growth. We reward growth more than anything else. And you may think you do that now through your compensation programs, but a lot of compensation programs reward new business, not necessarily growth in the entire book. The other thing we do is we provide negative incentives for lack of growth. In other words, there's a give and take. One of the failures that we've seen throughout our entire career, I'm sure yours as well as mine, Jack, is that most agencies feel that they have to give of the agency to the producer, but they never get anything in return. So if a producer performs, they get all sorts of rewards. But if they fail to perform, they don't necessarily get anything negative.
Okay, I love it.
We need to eliminate that situation. We do so with existing producers, but we certainly do it with new producers as well. So the question most insurance agents are asking me how are producers paid in agencies? I can honestly say that over the last 30 or 40 years, actually it's 42 years that I've been working with insurance agents, I have seen physically inside agencies probably several thousand agencies where I have gone in, talked to people, and been shown how they deal with their clientele, how they deal with their staff, and certainly how they deal with producers. And what we find is that while there's consistency in the three potential ways of paying producers, there are as many variances on how they're done as there are producers out there.
No two alike.
I'm sorry?
No two alike.
No two alike. The three consistencies are most people pay their producers on either salary, draw, commission, or on a combination of them. But from there, the combinations I've seen and the variances I've seen have been in the thousands. We, as you know, do the industry averages. We do our composite groups every year. We have several thousand agents that we analyze their financials. The industry averages in recent years has been paying producers between 30 and 33% of the commission dollar for the clients for whom the producer has direct retention responsibility. That last part is important. There are still a lot of agents that pay producers both new and renewal commissions on accounts that the producer never touches thereafter. The rule of thumb is if a producer is getting paid on it, then he must have something to do with maintaining that account.
Right.
If he doesn't have anything to do with the maintenance of that account, what are you paying for?
Exactly.
You're paying someone else to service that account as well. That 30 to 33% of the dollar is done in a variety of ways, and we'll touch on that in a little while. But the formula that we came up with many years ago now that will pay producers properly for the growth of agencies is called tiered compensation. Here's how it's been. Economies of scale, at which a producer becomes more profitable for writing insurance. Now that is most often, those economies of scale are most often based on revenue. In other words, a producer that does $100,000 worth of commission income isn't worth as much to the agency, does not profit the agency as much as a producer who does $600,000 worth of income. And that's not just because of the size of the income, that's because that $600,000 producer is much more profitable as well. While you may make a few percent profit on a $100,000 producer, $100,000 commission producer, you might very well be making 30 or 40% profit on someone who does $600,000 or more than, even more than that. So we most often, the best measurement, the most accurate measurement of the economies of scale is by using a combination of revenue and client count. Because when you tier compensation, what you're looking for is the producer to continuously grow his book of business, and the growth of the book of business is measured in two different ways, by dollar amount, certainly, or by client numbers. The more clients you have, the better you are as an insurance agency, as long as the clients are large enough to pay their own way, that you're not using them as loss leaders. And that's a topic of another conversation, Jack, that we ought to do sometime in the future, how to turn small commercial accounts profitable. Now, most agencies who go into tiered compensation have several tiers of profitability that differentiate producer compensation. When I talk about the several tiers, what I'm saying is at different levels of revenue size of producers, they make more profit for you, not just more income, but more profit as well. For instance, in the first level is in the industry. We have seen insurance agencies paying as little as 20 and 25% for production. But the average around the industry is around 30 to 33%. However, once they break into the second tier of productivity, where the agency is making potentially 3 times the profit as a percentage of revenue as they are for standard producers, we add another 5% for generating sufficient clients and sufficient revenue to grow that profit by 10 or even 15%.
So they could make up to nearly 40% conceivably.
Well, in the second tier.
Yeah.
And that's not the last tier either. The key to the tiered compensation is to permit the compensation to grow from the first dollar, not just on subsequent revenues. So we're not saying pay them 30% for the first $100,000 and 38% for the next 100 and so on and so forth. The jumps are large enough that when you reach the second level, the second tier, you're actually getting paid 5% more on every dollar you produced. So if you want to know how incentives really work for producers, believe me, when they think that they're going to get a $15,000 bonus by growing to a certain level of commission, they're going after that with a vengeance. And if they know that happens every time they reach an agency breakpoint, they are desperately trying to continue to grow both in number of clients and dollar revenue, and we do measure both when we do our tiered compensation program. The next thing every agent asks us is, how do you define the agency breakpoints? Financial analysis per client based on a known agency profit percentage, which is the profit percentage in your agency last year. However, that isn't necessarily the profit percentage that you report on your tax return. It's the real profit percentage. A lot of agencies in the United States, especially the smaller ones, tend to empty out their bottom line every year. That doesn't mean they have a zero profit. They may have a 10, 15, 20% profit, but then they use it on discretionary expenses, either compensation to them, bonuses to other people, or they buy equipment, whatever they want to use it for. Certainly they're free to do so. But the profit percentage we're looking at is the real profit percentage. If you were running it as a corporate business, what would you be dropping to the bottom line before discretionary spending? Once you determine that profitability, you take literally the the revenue on producer-generated business and divide it by the number of clients you have, and you have your average revenue per client based on the profitability of your agency. That profitability is important because it may be adequate to move into a second tier or it may not. The second thing you do is determine the revenue required to generate the next level of desired profit. How you do that, we'll explain that in just a few minutes. But if your first level may be up to $300,000, that means that producers up to $200,000, $250,000, or $300,000 will earn that average commission of 30 to 33%. Then potentially producers from $300,000 to $500,000 may earn 38%. Producers over $500,000 may earn even more.
Okay.
Include any expense factors, by the way, when you determine the next level of desired profit. You take a look at your current profitability and you determine what your next level is by eliminating expenses, adding the revenue factors, and saying, if I only add one person, how much more revenue can I add to this agency without adding any further expenses? And what you'll find is that the profit margins at the bottom line rise very quickly. The next thing you do is you determine the gross revenue and the number of clients to achieve that goal. You already know what your average revenue per client is. So if it takes your agency another $200,000 or $300,000 to grow to the next level of profitability you need, and you know that you're generating an average of $1,000 per client in commission, then you divide one into the other, and you know that you need another 100 clients in order to reach the next level of profitability, and that's going to be the target for the agency and for your producers in order to move to the next tier. And that's where your next tiering comes in. Make this number your next tier for each of your producers. Incentives and penalties.
Oh, yes.
What do we do? How do we pay producers, and how do we penalize them if they don't achieve what they need to? Historically, as I said before, agents have only been given positive incentives to their producers. Well, positive incentives are wonderful as long as the producers react positively. But what happens when a producer stops? Well, our only answer was that if producers didn't perform, and they didn't perform for long enough, we'd get teed off at them, and eventually the agency and producer would part company. That tail for producers who weren't producing was way, way, way too long. Agencies were finding themselves paying an awful lot of money at producer compensation for producers who weren't selling any new business, they weren't growing the agency. So we figured that it's reasonable for an agency to provide both performance incentives, strong incentives for performance, and disincentives for non-performance within the producer's contract.
Oh, absolutely. That gives you you can track it and stop it before it gets out of hand.
Exactly. Now, this for one, for growing the agency's book of business to successively higher profit levels. We'll explain in a few minutes how to gauge what those profit levels should be. It also is a potential in many agencies for equity. For instance, when you hit high-tier producers who are generating $700,000, $1 million or more of commissions in an agency that may only have $2 or $3 or $4 million total, you want to tie that producer to the agency with golden handcuffs. You want to make it very difficult for that producer to leave on his own or to be drawn away by an offer from another agency for equity positions or the purchase of their book of business or whatever else it takes. We've seen this happen often in agencies when a producer reaches the $700,000 to $1 million level when they know how important they are to an agency, but the agency gives nothing in return to keep that producer anchored. So equity potential is golden handcuffs. It only makes sense for a producer if he's going to retire from that agency. On the other hand, we involve penalties for not growing the business that involves decreasing commissions from year to year. Those decreases are not major. They're not life-threatening. They don't threaten their earnings. However, they do impact their egos because a 1% decrease in commission isn't going to stop a producer from paying for his family's expenses, but it will make them think twice about not growing in the next year.
Gets their attention.
Sure does. And it is one way of showing producers has to have the upside, and if you don't do what you're expected to do, there's got to be a downside.
Okay, so
now, the difference between producers and account executives. Many agencies call their customer service reps account managers, customer service, account executives, all sorts of names. We have a differentiation in definition. A customer service reps are sitting at desks handling transactions on behalf of the customers. Account managers are customer service reps at the next level. They basically have a book of business for which they're responsible. And by the way, while CSRs are paid a salary, account managers are paid a salary. It's based on the book of business that they manage. Okay. Account executives are a level above that. Account executives do everything that a producer does with one exception. They don't sell insurance. They're certainly licensed, and they will certainly cross-sell. They'll certainly fill out existing clients, but they're not out on the hunt looking for growth in the book of business by adding new clients. On the other hand, producers are always in a growth mode. Producers are paid according to their productivity and profitability for the agency, such as in tiered compensation along with others. On the other hand, account executives are hired to be maintenance people. Their job is to maintain the book of business that they're given, to make sure that the relationships remain strong and the clients remain with the agency. They're not expected to go out, pound the pavement, and sell a lot of insurance. So for that reason, the average account executive compensation is between 25% and 30% of the book of business for which they're responsible for retaining, while producers are paid for growth. Producers sometimes become account executives. We're going to an agency in the next few weeks where I'm told that there are 12 producers. However, when they sent me the information on the producer's history, I already know that they have 4 producers and 8 account executives, because they have 8 people that have basically maintained the same book of business over the last 5 years. Grown a little bit one year, shrunk a little bit the next year. Their jobs appear to be, we'll find out for sure, but it appears to be the maintenance of client relationships. The producers within those agencies are out pounding the pavement, selling insurance every year. They want to keep the clients that they have, but they need the agency's help to keep those clients. Their main concern is growth. So how do producers become account executives? Well, the first way we've seen, and it happens to everybody, personal problems that can cause slumps, where something happens to a marriage, or something happens physically, or something happens emotionally, and a producer gets down, and suddenly for sometimes extended periods of time, he's not growing, he's not selling insurance. What he's doing, hopefully, is maintaining the relationships he has, but not really going forward for the agency. Another problem that we see historically, and even the greatest producers out there, is when they fill up the tank.
What do you mean by fill up the tank?
Every producer has a level of capacity where they can handle X number of clients. Those clients always put some pressure on you to serve their needs. Well, what happens when you have no clients at all? How do you spend your day? Well, you spend your day out selling insurance.
Right.
You're meeting people, talking to people who are not clients of the agency. Now, when you have 10 customers, you still have plenty of time to go out and sell insurance. When you have 100 customers, you may start seeing your time get limited severely as to how much sales time you have. What happens when you have 200 or 300 customers? Those customers put a lot of pressure on you to deal with them, and you may find all of your time, or most of your time, devoted to maintaining your relationships. Basically, your tank is full. You can't add any more. There are solutions to that, but that's one of the ways producers become account executives. Another way that we've seen quite often is when producers who are always hungry for money achieve their level of comfort. When someone says, I'm making $150,000, $200,000 a year, I now have my boat, I have my second house, my wife and I want to spend time together, my kids are all grown, I'm now happy, I've got my bass boat, I'm out on the golf course 3-4 times a week. They lose the hunger in their stomachs. They're no longer burning for growth. They've lost that feeling that they have to make the next $10,000 in order to achieve what they need. That's a third way. And finally, we have my famous quote that I think you were a part of some 15 or 20 years ago when I gave an interview and called some agents RIP, retired in place. Mm-hmm. These are folks who say they paid their dues, and now it's time for somebody else to do it. And they're going to rest on their laurels, and that's okay, but they're not producers anymore, they're account executives. So those are how producers become account executives. Now let's talk about a producer who you know is having personal issues. You have to live through those personal issues. A few times we have seen agencies say, look, if you're not selling for 3 months in a row, you're out of here. And they realize that they're having family problems, marital problems, what have you, but they're not waiting long enough to let those get over with. Once the producer is done with that personal issue, he's back, but he may be back for someone else. We'd rather he be back for the agency who lived through the good times with him and some of the bad times.
So it's a delicate balance.
It is. You have to be sensitive. Either a sales manager or an agency owner has to look at the producer and say, is this person worth saving? Is this a temporary or permanent issue? The second way to make account executives back into producers is to buy out their smallest accounts every year. We have some agencies, really strong ones, probably our strongest clients, who tell their producers that they will buy from them. Now, the producers don't own books of business, but they have, of course, residual income that they earn from retaining those clients. And so what the agency says is, I'm going to pay you for a certain amount of time, a certain amount of money, to give up the smallest of your clients that are not related to larger clients, and we'll give them to account executives and account managers, giving you more time. This is for the producer who throws down the gauntlet and says, look, I've run out of time. For the 200 clients I've got or the 150 clients I have, I'm spending all of my time tending to them. A lot of those clients may be small from the standpoint of the compensation that the producer gets or the relative importance to the agency. We don't want to lose those clients, but the producer gives them as much time as he gives his largest clients. So what we do there is we continue their compensation on those clients for a year or 2 years, and then continue a residual for the lifetime of that client. Or we pass the small accounts to an account manager who's paid less and is responsible for the maintenance of those clients. Those clients are not told, hey, listen, we're shifting your responsibility. If they call the producer certainly talks to them, but they will find that more and more of the efforts of the agency on behalf of the client is being done by someone else who's on the producer's team. That's how we advertise it, being on the producer's team. Now, there are other situations, solvable problems. The people who are financially comfortable, they're no longer motivated. They should be converted into account executives. If you are in the tiered compensation program, or if you're a client of ACG and we've helped you evolve your producer contracts, every producer contract is a decreasing or increasing contract down to a base. Basically, that base is what we value or what the agency values someone in an account executive position. So if they're not growing anymore, they do deal with a few less percentage points in compensation, and they become account executives maintaining their business. Of course, if they write new business, if they grow, we'll pay them growth commissions as well.
Okay.
And finally, the RIPs. If you've got somebody who says, I've done this for 30 years, I'm not going to do this anymore, they are retired in place, those people are neither producing nor servicing their accounts. They're basically resting on their laurels, and they want their money, but not the work that goes along with it. They should be retired. So those are the ways of converting account executives who are no longer in a production mode. Now we have left, hopefully, in some of these agencies that are watching this webinar, some super producers or potentially super producers. How do you manage those people? That's very exciting, because what we do is we keep them out of the office. The job of a producer, a super producer especially, is to work with people that you don't yet insure and work with clients to make sure that they continue to be satisfied with the agency. That doesn't mean that you're doing endorsements for them. What it means is that you are paying attention to them, you're helping them solve strategic problems with their insurance programs, and you're making sure that the services of the agency are fully utilized and that they're happy with you. Limit their account management to only second-level problem solving. That means don't be a customer service rep. But if the client has a problem with CSR or with anything that an insurance company has done, they should feel free to go to their producer and talk about it. The main job of that producer is devising strategies for evolving insurance programs. Now, the next thing here is to make sure they always know the condition of their client, but never act in the place of the CSR. Don't be a CSR, but be in touch with the CSR to know where their client is. Your job as the agency owner is pretty straightforward. Make sure that all the roadblocks to the activity of super producers are taken down. If there is anything that stops a producer from being out of the office 3, 4, in some cases 5 days a week, you make sure that those roadblocks get down, that the producer can be out of the office, keep out of their way. That doesn't mean that they have free reign. You're going to monitor everything they do, and our super producers are very proud. They not only do reports, but they're proud of it to show the agency owner how much they're actually getting done on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. So we gauge the producers, the super producers, based on their activity. That means we measure the results of a steady flow of strong activity on an ongoing basis. That starts with setting the producer's goals. A lot of our clients, people who know Agency Consulting Group, know that we do validation schedules that define the number of sales calls, right down to how many people they have to see on a weekly basis in order to achieve the annual growth goal that will satisfy the agency and compensate the producer to the level that he expects to be compensated. If a producer says, I need to make $20,000 more next year, our job as his agency is to show him what he needs to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in order to do that. We have available of our validation schedule program. It'll be a 30-day sample, allows you to play with it. And if you like it, then you can either buy it for your use or you can call us and have us work validation schedules for each of your producers as part of the tiered compensation or part of producer activity. That's just something we'll throw out for all of the IMMS folks who are interested in seeing this.
Well, I see that we left off the last digit, but they can find that at the end of the presentation of the toll-free number.
I'm sorry. Did I?
So I did, or somebody
did.
Yes,
if you call 779-2443, you won't get anybody. It's 2430. I apologize.
2430. No, it's however it happened, it did. But anyway, no problem. That will be helpful. And wow, that's a great tool.
Now, the validation schedule is only one piece of it. It certainly will tell you and the producer what's expected of them, but we have to make them responsible for ensuring that they do their best job. It isn't our responsibility. It's not the agent's job to track a producer. It's the producer's job to track himself and tell his boss what he's doing on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. This is because the producer, the only kind of job function in an insurance agency, is not in the house under the eyes of the owner at all times. The producer is supposed to be on his own doing things. He has to tell the owner of the agency what he's doing and how that works. So we use war boards and prospect banks. we'll show you examples of that in upcoming slides. A war board is basically a listing of everything the producer is involved with that requires further action somewhere down the road. So if he sees a client, a prospect, and he starts a relationship with that prospect, and he commits to coming back to that prospect in a month or two, that goes on the war board. The producer then knows that he has that responsibility. The agency owner also knows that. And when the time comes for the producer to go out to that prospect again, if the agency owner notices that the time is getting close and the producer hasn't made an appointment, he can ask him, the agency owner or the sales manager, using that war board as a basis. A prospect bank is different. The producer doesn't own the insurance policy, doesn't own the client. That client belongs to the agency. And the agency, therefore, has the ability and responsibility to hold a prospect bank. What happens if a producer gets hit by a truck? Something bad happens to him. Do we lose all the prospects that that producer has been working on? Not necessarily. As long as we have a prospect bank, then we know which producer is working on which prospects. That number one that guards the prospect for the producer. No other producer can go after those prospects. The agency owners and sales managers know where we stand on every prospect at every point in time. And believe it or not, as you know, Jack, we value hundreds, if not more, agencies every year. Those agencies with a prospect bank that is a workable and ongoing prospect bank are actually valued higher than agencies without them. So we look for war boards and prospect banks as part of our management tools, and we focus on weekly reporting. That weekly reporting automatically feeds monthly, quarterly, and annual reporting and measures the results versus those activity goals that we originally started when we laid out the producer's goals for growth and showed him his sales goals. I mean, he participates in creating those. Those are fed from one to the other, so both the producer, the sales manager, and the agency owner knows all of these at the same time. Now, here is an example, and I apologize for it being dark because of the coloring of the background.
Yeah, it's the background.
But you can get a pretty good idea of what a war board looks like. Who's the prospect? What's his premium and commission potential? When is his expiration date? The reason we have that expiration date column in here is because most agencies in the United States still consider it important. We do not. That's not really a subject of this conversation, but any agent who calls me, I will certainly explain why expiration dates are no longer maintain the level of importance that they once did.
Okay.
The next section is a last action date, and what happened. So what you put in there is when you were out and what you did. The next action goes into the next column, and the next action date goes in the final column. These are stored. We have systems that will allow this, or it can be done manually. And this is the management tool for the producer war board. The next item is the producer goal breakdown. And again, I apologize for the quality, but I'm sorry, Jack?
No, we get the concept.
Yeah, the top line shows production on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly basis. How many sales need to be made, how many proposals would be made for the producer in order to achieve those sales. That number of proposals are triggered not by industry standards, but by the history of that producer. So if that producer normally does one sale for every 3 proposals, then if he needs 10 sales, you assume he needs 30 proposals.
Okay.
The number of appointments are actual sales calls. The number of contacts are behind that. How many prospects does he need in order to get those number of sales calls? Below, of course, you have the premium, the agency commission, and the producer commission.
So it's a variation on the sales funnel.
It is. and this has been in use for many years. And then we have a goal tracking device, which takes those exact same things, and it looks at the number of sales, the number of proposals, the number of appointments, and the number of contacts made on a weekly basis. The left-hand side is the actual, the right-hand side is the projected, what he needed to do. Now suddenly, the producer, the sales manager, and the agency owner now see his actual results compared to his expected results on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, and then, of course, on an annual basis. So what this does is it gives you a terrific sales management tool, whether you have a professional sales manager in your agency or whether the agency owner is doing that himself.
Okay. So what gets measured gets done.
In order to assure the successful growth of a producer's book of business within the agency. All super producers, no matter how big an ego, no matter how successful they are, and we have some producers who are earning $1 million a year and more, they all seek both accountability on one side, they are all grown-up people, and praise on the other side. Even if they don't suggest it, they certainly don't turn it away either. And what that means is that we use the reporting tool for fine-tuning, not for threatening. It's of less importance the fact that he didn't achieve the results that he was looking for than it is why he didn't and what can he do to remedy the problem in the future. And when you, as an agency owner or sales manager, see something going wrong, a month, don't wait for the quarter, and certainly don't blame someone and at the end of the year tell someone that he had done the job poorly. Address it as soon as you see something going wrong, identify what the producer can do, and remedy the problem. Now here's a thing, a human relation issue that all agents should do, some don't. Public praise. Publicly praise positive results in front of everybody and his brother, because you're proud of it, and so should the producer be. But if you have a producer with performance problems, do it privately. Don't do it out on the floor. Don't do it in front of his peers. It's embarrassing. If it's something that you're not doing as a threat, you're not doing as a punishment, you're doing as a corrective action in order to help the producer achieve both his and your goals, do it privately. When you see a failure to report activity, the producer stops giving you his weekly reports, his call reports after every day, his monthly reports. It's the producer's job to give you the report. It's not your job to generate it. See that failure to report as a red flag. There is something going wrong if a producer is not proud of his reporting structure and is no longer showing that to you on a regular basis. So go be sensitive to the producer, find out what's happening, and make sure that he knows that you look at these things on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
What we've just given you over the course of this short period of time is a whole realm of how to create super producers. If you do this with either your existing producers, the ones who are willing to do it, or certainly any new producers, what you're going to have is a cadre of insurance producers who know what their job is to grow your agency's book of business and are aware that you're proud of them and paying them top dollar in order to do that. Meanwhile, in the tiered compensation program, you will make consistently more money as a percentage of revenue by paying producers more at the break points. And if you would like more information on it, here's my phone number, my email address, and my website. And it does have my full telephone number. It's 800-779-2430. And if I can't be clear enough, Jack knows everything. You can always call me.
But I don't know. Who knows? But anyway, Al, this is certainly one of the best webinars that we've done in the past 4 years. It's comprehensive. It has everything. It's detailed. It's I love it. And I want to thank you again for sharing your experience and your expertise. And, well, what can I say? It's been a learning experience, very valuable.
Jack, it's always my pleasure. You know that the IMMS agents have a place in our heart because they always seem to be the most progressive agencies in the country.
Okay.
And if they continue on that track, we will have a lot of contacts as a result of this webinar, and it will strengthen the agencies that choose to look at it and take action.
Absolutely. From your lips to God's ear, and thanks again.
My pleasure.